Since we are dealing with coronavirus in America, I feel it would be helpful and insightful to explain the philosophical and emotional layers of Albert Camus' The Plague. As one might have guessed, this novel is being viewed as relevant since this seemingly never-ending pandemic continues to overwhelm and depress the souls of America and the world. With this in mind, a perusal of the most provocative passages in The Plague should help alleviate the endemic angst imbuing most people these days and, hopefully, elevate their spirits. The plot of the novel is straightforward. A town called Oran is permeated by the bubonic plague, which leads to the town to self-quarantine for months. The narrator is Dr. Bernard Roux, a man who, once the plague takes hold of the city, works as the head doctor to help rid the plague while helping the afflicted either die peaceably or possibly find a cure. He works alongside a tourist named Jean Thoreau and journalist Raymond Rambert. However, these characters do not live by the same ethics or metaphysics. And the following passage sets up Roux' philosophy, and I quote, "Since the order of the world is shaped by death, mightn't it be better for God if we refuse to believe in Him and struggle with all our might against death, without raising our eyes toward the heaven where He sits in silence?" Roux asks this of Thoreau because Thoreau questions him if he believes in God. Roux does not. Yet his reasoning to fight against the plague is heroic. His logic resembles that of Camus' view of the myth of Sisyphus, in which Camus argues that if there is no objective morality in the world, one must nevertheless continue to live, because, in the end, people still suffer, and we still have a natural imperative to work with each other to mitigate suffering, regardless of our differences. Another crucial moment in the novel happens when Roux uses a serum on the son of a magistrate named Othon. There's a lingering scene of the boy enduring sporadic spasms of acute agony, his body contorting in grotesque contours, while Roux and a multitude of incapacitated infected watch in silence at the boy's lone struggle with the plague's uncompromising inevitability. And in tragic irony, the image of this forsaken child is described to be in a grotesque parody of crucifixion on the ramshackled bed. So, how can one feel sympathy for or believe in a righteous God who allows even more innocent children to live only to succumb to a brutal disease? With this question being raised, Camus has a possible answer. Throughout the novel, it is made apparent that the plague afflicts indiscriminately. It makes no distinction between rich or poor, selfish or generous, intelligent or ignorant, old or young. And with this revelation, the answer should be as bright as day. We all must help one another to fight against the absurdity of existence. Camus described himself as an absurdist, which is a school of thought in philosophy which came about from the works of Soren Kierkegaard, the great Christian existentialist philosopher. Kierkegaard's conception of the absurd can be found in his great book, Fear and Trembling, where he examines the Abraham and Isaac story while attempting to find a logical explanation for Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his child in the face of the absurd, which is a universe where no objective or inherent value can be determined. And Kierkegaard comes with more than one possible answer to this problem, but they all share the same acknowledgement. There can be no objective ethical values in an absurd universe. So, in response to this conundrum, Kierkegaard creates the Knight of Faith, a man who lives and breathes by a code which he defines his being. If a knight of faith believes and acts based on his metaphysical code against the meaninglessness of the absurd, then his existence is viewed as noble. And with this philosophy, Camus creates his own response to the absurd, which is the myth of Sisyphus. Dr. Bernard Roux is the Sisyphus in the plague, because his code of life is to help his fellow humans as a perpetual resistance to the absurd. By the end of the novel, Roux explains why he chose to document the history of the plague in the first place. And I quote, "He knew that the tale he had to tell could not be one of a final victory. It could be only the record of what had to be done, and what assuredly would have to be done again, if the never-ending fight against terror and its relentless onslaughts, despite their personal afflictions, by all who, while unable to be saints but refusing to bow down to pestilences, strive their utmost to be healers." Roux here was influenced by his friend Thoreau, who told him that, and I quote, "All I maintain is that on this earth there are pestilences and there are victims, and it's up to us, so far as possible, not to join forces with the pestilences." This is meant to say that we should not succumb to the logic of the pestilence, which is to destroy. And what does this mean in a time of coronavirus? Well, it's rather simple. In order to defeat the coronavirus, we must strive to be healers, the healers, and not the pestilence.